I'm often asked about the connection between anxiety and sensory processing issues. Is anxiety the root of those sensory processing issues, or is sensory processing issues the root of the anxiety? Well, it could be a bit of both, and that's what we're going to look at in today's video. Hi, I'm Anne-Laura Jackson, occupational therapist and sensory health coach. So this is a really, really good question. And that's why there is different answers according to how you look at it, how you assess the behaviours, what the anxiety is looking at. So from my perspective, because I always look at the senses first, because they are so foundational to everything, and that's what can feed into anxiety. We will also look at when it's anxiety that is not sensory based too. So firstly, our senses are there. They are designed, we are given them for our safety and protection. We can enjoy life, we can enjoy creativity and beauty, all the rest of those things, but they're the beautiful additions to who we are. Primarily, it is a protective. Our senses are very protective of who we are. That's why we don't go around putting other things in our mouths, because we just think if it's not a good taste, it could poison us and we'll die. If you don't have good proprioceptive, tactile awareness, if you don't feel your throat terribly well, you could gag and you could die. If you are hung upside down for any period of time, our bodies aren't designed to function upside down. All our blood pumps and flows in a certain way. So if we are upside down, which is the vestibular system telling us that we are upside down, it doesn't like it. It sets off alarm bells in the body, because that isn't a natural state for us to be in, and we could easily die if we were held upside down. So that's the very basics of anxiety, that we have these protective mechanisms for very, very good reason. Our tactile system, if we have something crawling on our arm, who knows what it's going to do when it bites us? We are on alert just in case it's going to poison us or do something in that way too. And if our limbs go numb, as our proprioceptive system isn't getting that feedback from our muscles and our joints because we've been lying funny, our brains are like, oh, that's a bit weird, I don't like that. So those senses, things that we hear, smell, move, all of our senses together are there to protect us primarily. It is our place of safety. So that is why when any of those senses aren't integrated and aren't processing well, it will set the body up to be more anxious. Our minds will be more anxious because we are very much on alert for the things around us and what our bodies are telling us if our senses aren't well integrated. So that is a big, big reason for a lot of our mental health issues. We think it's for talking therapy. We think we need to be cognitively helping people to consciously think about how they can cope in situations. Now, there is a place for that, but when the underpinnings are because of what they feel, how they move, how they sense the world, well then let's just do sensory strategies, and that will reduce the anxiety. So that is the interplay from sensory processing to anxiety. And of course, then we need to assess it. We need to assess the anxiety. We need to assess the individual's sensory thumbprint, find what is unique to them and how they process the senses, and see if any of those attributes, any of those symptoms are playing into the anxiety. But of course, from a typical anxiety perspective, sensory issues won't have anything to do with it, because it is about emotionally what's happened to them. It is cognitively the kind of things that they are thinking. It is brain neurochemicals doing something completely different that has nothing to do with sensory processing. Having said all that, it could be then that because they are heightened in their nervous system because of anxiety, that they are more sensitive to sensory processing issues. So that sensitivity will raise sensory processing difficulties, and then that can then feed into anxiety. So there can really be an interplay that they are just feeding into each other and feeding into each other if we have any sensory issues involved at all. So that's why it's really important that we calm the senses. We do calm the brain. We calm how the brain thinks. So we want to nurture those senses. We want to protect those senses. We want to make sure socially and emotionally they can be as regulated as possible. And this is where it gets hard. in schools, in work environments, in the home, if we are not protective of those senses, because they are primarily really over bombarding bodies and minds and spirits and senses with an awful lot of input. If you take the average school, there is visual stuff everywhere. There's lots of bumping into you. There's lots of sounds. The sounds are full on all the time. The sensory overload is huge. So it's really important in schools that we get that accommodations, we get those sensory accommodations right for the individual and make it individualized for each person, because of course everybody's sensory processing is different. So we need to accommodate what we can in schools. We need to accommodate what we can in the workplace. We need to assess, we need to understand what is going on in the senses that is going to feed into that anxiety, which doesn't help someone function to their best. They're not going to be as productive as you want them to be in the workplace. They're not going to be as kind as you would like them to be at home. They're not going to be as successful in school, college, or university because of the way that the senses are feeding into anxiety. So it's a lovely interplay between the two of them. It's quite something, but it is really important that we look at sensory processing at least if we feel that someone has anxiety or is anxious, and let's see if any of the senses are at the root of that. So if you want to explore more, learn more, find out more about how the senses might be affecting you, your child, a work colleague, then head over to annelaurejackson.com. There are free resources for you to download, or you can book a 15-minute call if you're ready to take action and to get seriously into changing what is going on for you. So here's to your sensory health. Santé.